This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome, Awareness Explorers, to Awareness Explorers. I am your co-host, Jonathan Robinson, and I'm with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And it is another day of exploration in planet Earth, and we are going to be talking about a subject that is dear to many of our hearts. We spend a lot of time in this experience. It's called the experience of self-criticism.
Ouch.
Right. How we do it, how we get lost in it, how we get out of it, and who knows what else we'll explore. Hopefully we'll do a good job of it, because I would hate to, at the end of it, end up criticizing myself about self-criticism. But as we approach this topic gingerly and with love, Brian, what occurs to you about this topic right off the top of your head?
You know, the first word that pops into my head is unnecessary.
For something that's unnecessary, we certainly spend a lot of time thinking that it's an important way to be. You know, the average person, I think I read, criticizes themselves something like 1 million times a day. I'm exaggerating here, and I often criticize myself for exaggerating. So it's kind of a loop that you get lost in. And many people use the excuse that, well, I'm trying to better myself. That's why I have this inner critic. But a question I have is, does the inner critic really help us better ourselves at all? I mean, have you ever criticized yourself into being a better person?
No, I never have. But I think it's really important to make a distinction between emotional self-criticism and practical self-criticism. In other words, let's say you're learning to be a good tennis player and your coach says you need to improve your forehand, and then you practice it. Or you watch a video of yourself playing, or if you're a singer, you hear a recording of yourself singing, and you hear what mistakes you made, and you try to improve on those mistakes. That, I think, is non-toxic, because that's just practical. It's not about whether I am bad. It's what can I improve? But the self-criticism I think we're talking about here, if I'm not mistaken, is the one that says, you're bad. You're a bad person for doing that thing or thinking that thought. What do you think?
I think that you're right, and that there's different levels or degrees of viciousness of what can be called the inner critic. For some people, it's kind of like, maybe you should have done that a different way. For other people, it's like, you horrible, terrible person, how could you possibly do that? And, you know, as a psychotherapist, I see these different flavors of self-criticism in other people. And I've noticed in myself that over time, I used to have a very vicious self-critic, and now I have a very gentle one. And the gentle self-critic is more like a monitoring system in which you are getting feedback as to how to do something different. It might even be almost loving in how it expresses itself. But we're not talking about that. We are talking about the incessant self-critical loop and self-narrative of how we should always be different than we are, that really takes somebody out of the realm of awakening awareness and into the realm of commenting on your navel over and over again in a way that's not helpful.
Yeah, I agree. It's not helpful if what your goal is discovering your true nature as awareness. And self-criticism is a subcategory of defining yourself. And all self-definition is just a matter of ideas, concepts in your mind, and they're not really true because they're based on delineation, on separation, and as opposed to oneness and unity, which I believe is the truth.
Mm-hmm. And as we go down to dissecting self-criticism, we can see that there's different flavors in terms of how loving or vicious they are, but also on what they are criticizing. For example, you can criticize your behavior, which might be okay, like, oh, I could have done that better. But when it comes to criticizing your character, it can become more toxic and more defining in a way that is unhelpful. And we also criticize our accomplishments or lack thereof. And the question is it always detrimental, or can it sometimes be useful as a motivational tool? For example, I might have a thought that says, oh, I should meditate more. Well, that seems like it might be useful if it leads to action. But a lot of people's self-criticism never leads to action. It's just a thought loop that they get lost in and therefore is completely unhelpful. So a question I have for people listening is, does your type of self-criticism that you involve yourself with, does it ever actually motivate you or not? I think the answer is different for different people.
Yes, it probably is different for different people. And it's also, you speak of the distinction that we made earlier between practical self-criticism that's used simply to get better at some skill you'd like to acquire, and the sort of emotional self-criticism that says you are bad, which can be as extreme as your core wound or your feeling of total lack of self-worth. And I think that another way of putting this is to make a distinction between shame and guilt, which many psychologists have done. And guilt is, I did something bad, and shame is, I am bad. And it seems to me shame is a lot more toxic and a lot less helpful. Whereas guilt could be, okay, I did something bad. Let me try not to do that again. Or let me see if I can make amends. And that can be healthy, but only if you think of it as something positive that you can learn from and maybe be more loving in your relationships in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are good distinctions. Something I've often wondered about in working with a lot of clients who are very self-critical, always focusing on the negative, does it do any good for them in terms of awakening to then put more focus on the positive, like their beautiful qualities? Is that helpful for balancing things out, or is that just feeding the same judgmental way of looking at things? And I don't really know the answer to that. It does seem like as people focus on what's good about them, that they become a bit happier, but it does kind of get you lost in the same cycle of judging everything. And I'm wondering what your thoughts about that are.
Yeah, I think it can be helpful at the beginning. I mean, if you spend all your time with self-criticism thoughts, with your inner critic saying, what a jerk you are, how could you have done that, you bad person, then maybe looking for some good qualities might be helpful at the beginning, or simply practicing something like gratitude or appreciation. Looking for the good definitely can help and take the edge off. And I think it's a great first step, but I think you make a really good point. In the end, no self-definition is going to help you discover your true self, because it's words, it's concepts, it's delineation. It's not this, but that. And if you are focused on that, you are not turning your attention to the place where happiness and the real you, your true nature is, which is pure subjectivity, the total background in which anything appears, including self-definition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the evaluating mind of good and bad is not something that other mammals share. My dog isn't thinking, I really shouldn't lick my leg. I think he shouldn't lick his leg, as much as he does, or whatever he does. But he's not thinking, yeah, oh God, I'm doing it again. I can't believe how much I like to lick my leg. I really shouldn't do it, but I'm doing it again. And, because he's not doing that, he's a lot happier than most humans, because there is no evaluation there until I tell him something. And, evaluation is good to a small point if done with love and care, but it's a completely different lens than the lens of awareness or isness. Things just are. We're the only mammal that seems to have so many judgments as to what's good, bad, right, and wrong. And that just weighs us down after a while, where it kind of crowds out the isness of life. And that's where true awakening and peace is. So if you have so many loops of inner critical thoughts, it just crowds out the other possibilities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I couldn't have said it better. Shakespeare said it pretty succinctly when he said, "There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so."
Mm-hmm.
And there's another expression. I think this comes from 12-step groups, but I'm not sure. Stop shoulding on yourself.
Right. I sometimes have tuned into that word, should, and I really shouldn't say it so much inside my head. It's I don't think of myself as being very inner critical of myself nowadays, but tuning into the word should, which can be critical or not. I mean, there's degrees. I saw that was very big in my inner dialogue. Oh, yeah. I should do this. I should do that. I should go to the gym. I should give this person a call. Once again, I don't think my dog is doing that. I really should be barking at the postman, but I'm too lazy. He's not doing that. He's just resting, having a good time. And sometimes he barks, sometimes he doesn't, and all is well in the world. So one of the things that would be nice for us to learn is how to self-correct gently and maybe even less often, because I think if you're saying should all the time to yourself, that's another form of burden.
It really is. And I think there's probably two possible and maybe more remedies for this. One would be, say, Byron Katie's approach, asking, is it true? How can I know it's true?
Mm-hmm.
Who would I be if I didn't have that thought? I think those are really useful and valuable. And I think the second one is this: even with self-critical thoughts and shoulds running through your mind, awareness is there, untouched by the critical thoughts, totally okay with the critical thoughts, completely allowing and accepting already. So it's not so much that you have to somehow get rid of thoughts in your brain, because then you're just going to fight your brain forever. But you're going to notice that those thoughts, they just come in unbidden, and they're noticed by something larger, something more spacious, something totally allowing and loving that's already there, which is the background of awareness, which is you, your true you.
Mm-hmm. Well said. When I was 18, I was suicidally depressed, and I stopped talking for a while because I would have this voice in my head that would say, you better not say that, you'll look stupid. And it got so bad that I actually stopped talking for a while. And then I read, about this method I've mentioned in other podcasts where you change the tone of the voice. And I changed it to sound like Mickey Mouse. So it would say, instead of, you better not say that, you'll look stupid, which, struck me like if I said something, I might die. I changed it to sound like Mickey Mouse, and it would say, you better not do that, you'll look stupid. And I could laugh at it. And that was a start of disidentifying with my thoughts. I realized that not all my thoughts were, quote, my thoughts. They were just things arising, and that they were not necessarily my friend. And when you can identify a thought pattern that's not your friend and find a way to disidentify with it, either through a Mickey Mouse voice or a rebuttal or just anticipating it, like, oh, there you go again, that thought, or some other way of not taking it so seriously. Sometimes I will kind of make fun of some of my thoughts as a way of just, not being impacted by them. And that whole process can be very good if you use self-criticism, if it comes up a lot, to work with it as a practice, like saying, oh yeah, there's the self-criticism. And then even one way of changing it is to, in the Finder's course, they suggest just saying cancel, cancel. I'm not going there. Or another way is to actually appreciate your self-critical thoughts, like, wow, I do self-criticism really well. And that changes the energy. It changes the loop. And in fact, some of the people you and I have interviewed, or I interviewed for books that became very awake and enlightened, they often reported that they would love the parts of themselves that were self-critical. And in the guided meditation we do later today, I'll go into that. But somehow being attuned to this pattern and working with it in a way that works with you can be a really big step in awakening.
Wow, those are really terrific and highly practical things. I think the voice, changing the voice is marvelous. I think the whole idea of sort of separating, being bigger than it, seeing yourself as something in which it appears, which is paraphrasing what you said, but it's the same idea that I think that those are really, really helpful. And there's another method that I use, which is, there goes Brian again doing that thing. Mm-hmm. There goes Brian again, getting him mad at those people who ride bicycles on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
So it sort of gives a little distance. I think was that the word you used? It gives you a little distance from it. And you see it just as something that the action figure does. That's a Paul Hederman term, which I really love. There's the action figure, which is this body and mind that does things and thinks things and feels things. And then there's the real you that notices the action figure. So I think getting some separation and distance is good. And there's one other thing that I wanted to mention, which I think is important, which really helped me a lot. Mm-hmm. I was listening to a recording of a satsang with Adyashanti, and a young man said that he had done something that he was really ashamed of, that he couldn't feel he could ever get over. And I expected Adyashanti to say, oh, well, just notice the awareness that appears in, or it's not so bad, or whatever. But instead he said, do you realize that thinking that you should not be the type of person to have done something like that is arrogance? Mm-hmm. And that really hit me like so strong. Of course. Am I the type of person who should never do things? And the correlation of inner criticism is perfectionism, is the idea that somehow we shouldn't make mistakes, somehow that we should be perfect, and somehow we should never be criticized.
Yeah, that's the context in which the self-critical thoughts get their juice. Now, if you look at that context, you say, well, that's ridiculous.
That's right. It is ridiculous. And so I do think we need to cut ourselves some slack. I don't mean that you should never try to get good at a skill, but you get good at it. You need a certain perspective on it, a kind of an almost impersonal perspective. Okay, my forehand is weak. What exercises can I do to strengthen them? Not, oh, I am a lousy tennis player and I'll never win Wimbledon and I'll be ashamed the rest of my life. It's night and day, the difference. And one is useful, helpful, and one is completely unnecessary and harmful. But both of them are simply thoughts that appear in the vast, clear, open awareness.
It's funny that you use that tennis example, because as you were saying that, I was thinking about how in high school, I was on the tennis team. I was a pretty lousy tennis player, but I went far because I found a weakness in my opponents. And that is I would hit really high lobs to the back of the court and they'd try to smash it. But, high school tennis players trying to smash from the back line would often miss it, and they miss the point, and they get really mad at themselves for doing that. And so a lot of the people I would win because they would get so mad at themselves that their game would end.
Right.
And it was kind of like pushing the self-criticism button in other people to the point that they would just lose it totally. And that's how I won in tennis, despite not being very good. I also thought that we're not just critical of ourselves, we're critical of other people. And there's probably a correlation between how critical and judgmental we are of others and how critical and judgmental we are of ourselves. So another way of working on self-criticism is to become less judgmental of other people. And I've often worked with phrases to help me with that, such as a lot of people say the phrase, well, people are always doing the best that they can. And you can often see that in other people, and then you can use that on yourself. Well, I'm doing the best that I can, with the resources I have and the wisdom I have, I'm always doing the best that I can. Or another phrase that I've used is they're being a perfect them. And I say that to myself, well, I'm doing Jonathan perfectly. And he, part of that is making mistakes and doing things he shouldn't do. And he's doing it really well. I had a friend who was very, very loving. And I asked her how she's not judgmental about anyone. And she had a phrase that she used when she was seeing somebody do something that maybe other people would be judgmental about. She'd say, "Oh, isn't that cute?" And once, this was a friend long ago, and when my stepfather was alive, the guy who used to beat me up somewhat regularly, we went out to lunch with my parents, and my stepfather, as he was prone to do, started yelling at my mother in the restaurant and, making quite a scene. And I asked Linda later, so what do you think of my stepfather? And she said, "Oh, he was so cute." And I go, "Really? Like when he called my mother a effing bitch, at loud volume, that was cute?" And she said, "Well, he's kind of like a little boy having a tantrum." And I thought it was so cute how he just is, just like you might see a 2-year-old throw a tantrum. I just thought it was so cute that this, 250-pound guy is having a tantrum, expressing himself just like a 2-year-old. And, it was interesting for me to see that that's how she was looking at it. And I thought, well, maybe that's a good technique. Every time I'm getting down on myself or getting down on somebody else, just say, "Oh, that self-critical voice, it's so cute. It's just trying to make us better in its own way," or any behavior, and it's changing the energy from that constricted, judgmental, down on yourself, everything should be different voice to either appreciation or cuteness, or it's perfect the way it is, or people are doing the best that they can. I think people have to find the alternative lens that works for them to get out of that whole realm of constriction and tightness that self-criticism and judgment is about.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love that technique. And you could also try seeing someone as a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Acting that way. And I think that's great. And I think that one thing that's related to this, which I think is really important, is why is that critical voice there? And you said something, I can't remember whether you said, it's only trying to help. I think that's what you said. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really important, because often a critical voice in your head is there to prevent your personality, the action figure, from doing something that can be criticized by others or punished. So it's there to preempt, it's there to prevent you, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, it's there to protect you. It was installed very early when you were a little kid and you didn't know better, and it was there to protect you. Why would it want to protect you? Because it loves you.
Mm.
And if you can see that critical voice as being critical because it wants to protect you, because it loves you, it's just that it's not needed anymore. It's doing something that was needed when you're 2, but is no longer needed now. So thank it for its opinion, thank it for trying to help, but don't worry, I've got this.
Yeah, that's another very simple internal Aikido move.
Yeah.
Thank it, appreciate it, and give it a new lease on life or a new job or something. That's part of the therapy process known as internal family systems. Talk to that voice and see if you can find out what its higher intention is and thank it for serving in that way. And then gently remind it that it's not needed in this moment and that can calm it down from its incessant way of being. And there's a whole therapy system based on that. When I lead people on MDMA journeys, we often work with this voice and try to send it love, because it's almost like a unloved child. And if it can receive love, if it can know that you care about it, it kind of unwinds it, it kind of relaxes it, and it learns to be more loving, more accepting, and more relaxed.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really a great approach. And internal family systems is also a good approach, and very similar to the voice dialogue therapy of Hal and Sidra Stone, who I'm guessing they even coined the term inner critic. And yes, it's really useful. You see it, you allow it to be heard instead of fighting it. You give it, you hear its voice, you let it have its say, but then you look at it from awareness, from larger than that.
I find that as the inner critic takes up less mental space, it allows a clearer view of the world and yourself.
Yes, absolutely. And I noticed that when I was actually working in a voice dialogue session with a guest that we've had on our show, Bridget Dengel Gaspard, and one of my inner voices said, if I keep focusing on what's wrong with me, I will never see and be able to fully express what's good about me. And that was huge.
How did that affect you?
Oh, it freed me. It allowed me to stop worrying about what's wrong, and it quieted that inner criticism a great deal, and it helped me appreciate my good points and actually express them in the world.
That's wonderful. Now, if some of our listeners experience self-criticism for not supporting our Patreon page, we have a way of dealing with that.
You sneaky devil.
I'm not done.
I know. Keep going.
So, yeah, if you find that the self-critical voice comes up for not giving us as little as $1 a month for listening to this podcast, well, our way of helping you with that is that you can go to patreon.com/awareness explorers and donate any amount of money. And we give you perks for doing that, because not only do we want you to eliminate your self-critical voice, but we want you to hear our bloopers, our extra interviews, our extra blogs that we send to people who support the podcast. How was that? Was that pretty good?
That was, yes, very good, and a very good segue in keeping with what we're talking about.
Thank you. Thank you. Any last thoughts before we do a meditation on how to effectively handle or change or love the self-critical voice.
Yes, I do have one more thought, and it's related to meditation. And again, it's something I learned from Adyashanti. He was talking about, let's say you are in a meditation practice where you are trying to be quiet. You're trying to not engage with the constant turnover of thinking. And you are sitting quietly with your eyes closed, and you're going fine for a while. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I've been thinking about tomorrow, or I've been thinking about work for the last 3 minutes. And he said the knee-jerk reaction is to say, wrong, you failed, you're a bad meditator. And he said much more helpful is to say, yes, congratulations, you caught it. Great. And then move on. And that's a totally different point of view, a whole new paradigm. It's similar to, I heard a story about a classical orchestra conductor. And in rehearsals, instead of berating people, he said, okay, just for this rehearsal, every time you make a mistake, I want you to stand up and say, interesting. You can change the paradigm of what that action figure does wrong through no fault of its own, just because it's human and flawed and imperfect, and embrace imperfection and love it.
That old Leonard Cohen line, there's a crack in everything, that's where the light comes through, or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's beautiful. And forget your perfect offering, as Catherine Ingram quoted in one of our episodes. Yes.
Yeah, that perfectionism can be very detrimental to the awakening process. And as that unwinds and relaxes with perhaps love and self-compassion, new possibilities arise.
Yes, yes. And it's all about the past, the future, and the body, mind, personality thing. I've been calling it today the action figure. I don't know why I like that term today. And that's not the real you. And so the other thing is, yes, compassion, love, acceptance, allowing, but also noticing that the real you, pure awareness, is already allowing, and it's already there, just waiting to be noticed.
And as you get in touch with the real you, I've noticed this for myself, as I get in touch with myself as awareness and the divine qualities that come from that, it's easier to take the self-criticism or even self-critical feedback from other people less seriously, or not seriously, less impactfully. You know, I just led some workshops and they went well, but I got some critical reviews as well. And, you know, people often tell me, you take criticism and feedback really well. And I think one of the reasons I do take it well, and I'm actually hungry for it, is because I know it's not talking about me so much. It's talking about the action figure.
Right.
And go, yeah, the action figure could use a little bit of a dusting off there, or could use a little bit of this or that. That's quite true. But since I know myself as awareness, it's not a punch to the gut. It's more like a nick to the fingernail.
Nice distinction. I wish that for everybody.
Me too. Me too. One way of getting that for everybody is to have them do a guided meditation in which they can have that experience.
Well, I'm looking forward to yours.
Well, luckily, I wrote one up, or I came up with one, and I think we will begin that now. So if you can, find a comfortable place, and if it's safe to do so, close your eyes. Take a couple of deep breaths. And we'll begin a meditation on looking at self-criticism by first having you think of something you criticize yourself about. It could be something general like being lazy, or something specific like your weight or how you don't make enough money, but just choose one thing for now. And as best you can, get in touch with how it feels to criticize yourself for that one thing. Perhaps you can hear that voice in your head and notice any constriction or tightness in your body as you think about something you feel should be different about yourself and you're critical about yourself for. Continue to notice and feel the vibration and the body sense of being self-critical. Now, to explore it even further, say to yourself, I am flawed. I am flawed. And notice how that feels. Now try something different. Say to yourself, I am feeling flawed. I am feeling flawed. And notice if that feels different. Now say to yourself, the thought of being flawed is arising out of a field of awareness. The thought that I am flawed is arising out of a field of awareness. And notice how that feels. The thought that I am flawed is arising out of a field of awareness. Now, for the last time, say the thought that I am flawed and the thought that I am perfect are both arising out of a field of awareness. The thought of being flawed and the thought that I am a perfect me both arise out of the same field of awareness. And notice how that feels. And perhaps you saw that as you disidentify that you are flawed in increasing layers, that those thoughts have less and less impact on you. And finally, imagine that you could send love and a hug to the part of you that scans for and comes up with self-critical comments. Perhaps you can visualize it as a character or as an energy, and just imagine that part receiving rays of love and compassion that help dissolve it and dissipate it or shrink it down under the healing power of love. Imagine giving the inner critic a hug and just noticing how it softens and dissolves. Now allow yourself to feel total acceptance for exactly how you are, flaws and all. There is nothing you need to do or change to be a perfect version of you. Now allow yourself to rest in that realization. And feel the softness, the openness, and the peace of being a perfect version of you, even with flaws, even with thoughts that you might not like, but it's all arising out of a perfect field of awareness. And when you're ready, take your time, come back to feeling your chair, allowing this moment to be just as it is, however it is. And when you're ready, you can slowly begin to open your eyes. Welcome back.
Thank you. That really worked for me. And a side effect of it was that I got really relaxed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the inner critic can keep us pretty wound up, both physically, mentally, and emotionally.
That's right. That's right. And another thing I noticed that's very interesting, you use the phrase arising from a field of awareness. And I often use the phrase appearing in a field of awareness. And I realized that they both can work, because arising from a field of awareness can be like a wave arising from the ocean and then falling back, and it's never not ocean. So I think I'm going to add that to my repertoire.
Great. Yeah. Part of our job here is to give people all kinds of possibilities, all kinds of new lenses and new methods. And their job, should they choose to accept it, your job is to find what works for you.
Yep.
Well, this worked for me.
Me too.
Okay.
I enjoyed this conversation very much, and I think we covered a lot of bases, and so I appreciate that we talked about this.
Me too. And hope that you get value. If you get value, give it to your friends who might suffer from this particular disease that affects human beings now, and pass the love on. Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.